Hey!
Hello! Welcome to DnDTime Talks, a show where we discuss all things Dungeons and Dragons. I'm Push to Talk Pete.
I'm Push to Talk Jeremy. I forgot to mute his Twitch stream, Jeremy. Woo! So weird hearing myself in echo there.
Hello, everybody. Oh, I was going to say hello to everyone Twitch chat first, but I am doing very well, and I'm struggling using Push to Talk. Yeah. That's what I got going on. I see Face of Jericho says he has a bone to pick with me. The world's document isn't accurate. It says skeleton 4 or 5. That's funny because he said a bone to pick, and it was about a skeleton.
How you doing, guys? I am doing pretty okay myself. I was doing real bad yesterday. Pete, you're doing good?
I am doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good.
Pete, would you say that the world is your oyster right now?
And I am its pearl.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, we're going to talk about some cool shit today. I'm excited to talk about this. How about you, Pete? You're in?
I am excited to talk about Lairs. That's our topic today, and I've introduced it seamlessly. Well, we're going to be talking about Lairs today. All kinds of stuff about them, when to use them, why to use them, and how to make them better than they are just by reading them in the book. Because if you just kind of read a lair in the book, you know, it has some mechanics, but it's not super engaging necessarily, I would say.
Like any monster in 5th edition D&D, Lairs are actually like a creature into their own right. You can play them just based on what stats they have. You can take your bugbear and say the bugbear walks forward and attacks, but unless you take advantage of the tools and interesting nuances to what the bugbear has to offer, it's going to be just kind of your normal monster. You can make any monster interesting, and the same, I think, super is important with Lairs. So,
absolutely.
It's going to be rad. Hello, Diadems, and hello, Bionic Sheba, and the Face of Jericho, and Sword Co here, and Reflected 10-8, and the Forgotten One, and I'm sure there were other people I missed. I love you all, too. And I see Pete is excited about Friday. Pete, are you excited about Friday?
I'm very excited about. Actually, I'm not excited about. Well, I'm excited for you on Friday, but I don't get to see the game on Friday because I have plans with my fam. But I'm excited about Friday in the abstract. That I know what you have planned now because you told me that a little while ago, and it's going to be baller as hell.
You're talking about Super Smash Brothers.
Oh well, I'm excited about Thursday because I'm doing that Thursday night at midnight at exact 12:01 release. I will be playing Super Smash Brothers until I pass out.
Well, there we have it, folks. There we have it. Pete's lair is going to be just a lot of Super Smash Brothers.
It's going to be a lot of Mountain Dew, Code Red, Gamer Fuel, and Doritos.
Fox only no items, Final Destination.
That is all incorrect. And that would be the lair. That would be the Fox's lair in Super Smash Brothers. Would be a no items, Final Destination situation. Let's start talking about lairs. It's actually a terrible lair. That's exactly the kind of lair we don't want you to make, a flat plane with nothing in it. But as always, if you have any comments, feel free to join in on the discussion in chat, and we'll be in chat as we go through and talk about lairs, so let us know what you think, if you got any questions or anything.
Yeah, so you want to just dive right in?
Take it away, Jeremy.
So before we can really talk too much about how to make your lairs interesting, we got to set some ground rules, a base foundation on what the fuck is a lair. And you got to think, first of all, what is a lair? It is the home to your monster. It is your monster's stronghold, their fortress, the place where they reside. And it serves two kind of purposes in 5th edition D&D. Mechanically speaking, it serves as a way to make a monster stronger than it would normally be, right? To provide a mechanical advantage to that creature for being in its home turf, for lack of a better term, its natural environment or what have you. And mechanically how it works is on initiative count 20, they get some special abilities that they can use that you have to cycle between, basically related to the environment or their lair. And then practically speaking, a lair is really meant to represent the preparations, the natural advantages that a creature would have in its home turf, designed to, in a lot of ways, emphasize and reflect the creature's existence and personality on the world around it, right? A good lair tells your players all they need to know about the monster before they run into it, which is a really important thing. You know, a lot of players, they run into a beholder out of nowhere and then they die because they don't know what's going on. They have no idea that this is some crazy thing, and they try and talk to it, which is dumb. Uh, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
So,
pretty quiet compared to Pete, apparently.
well, while you, if you're going to go in and boost your volume, let's talk a little bit now, since we've kind of established the baseline. Um, our main kind of goal is to talk about how to make your layers a little bit cooler and to make them, a bit more interesting. So for starters, when you're doing that, you need to really take kind of a hard look at your creature and whatever it is that you're trying to build the lair for, and consider what they're able to do. What would life be like for this creature, and how can their lair reflect what would be convenient and just easy for these creatures? As a very easy example, does the creature have flight? In which case, the inside of their lair or the outside of their lair, perhaps they live on a high cliff top, but access and movement through the lair would assume that it was made for them. So the lair of, say, a dragon would have a lot of high perches and wouldn't necessarily, a dragon does not require stairs on the most part. They just kind of go where they want to go. So these kind of locations wouldn't necessarily be made for traveling adventures. It wouldn't be easy to traverse that space. And there are all kinds of factors that might be just part and parcel to what a creature is that can kind of factor into the lair. Natural resistances, such on the same dragon, might have fire resistance. So they're naturally, find it easier and even more comfortable to be in a place that's, very hot, because they enjoy kind of the heat. Or a volcano, I think, is the classic red dragon lair, which I think we'll talk about the red dragon lair specifically a little bit more in a bit. But the ability to kind of rest and relax in magma, while deadly and treacherous to an adventure, that's just how they like to live. So you can think about all this stuff, how they move, how they speak, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and design a space that is suited for someone with those strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly. And the next question, right, is, so we've come up with this appropriate home, what makes sense to your creatures there. So the next thing is, well, why are they there, right? You got to think about your monster or villain in some cases, what their kind of goals are, and why this is their permanent, right, residence. Why this is where they live. Things like, are they guarding something, right? Have they made this their lair to protect some treasure? Maybe in the case of a dragon, like eggs or something. Do they need to rest frequently, right? Are they the kind of creature that needs sleep? I mean, some creatures don't, some creatures do. So like a Death Knight lair, probably not at all related to, restful sleep or slumber. Whereas, dragons need sleep. And then the final kind of point to think about as to why they make it their residence is, what aspects of your villain's goals does the lair help fulfill? If the lair is way out in the middle of nowhere and your ancient dragon's goal, right, is to conquer city way out in the middle of somewhere, the dragon's got to fly all across nowhere to get to somewhere every day to harass that town. And that doesn't make a lot of sense as being a practical lair for that dragon's goals. So keeping all these kind of things in mind, we're going to just continue to move forward and start talking about different types of layers and all that kind of good stuff. Oh, and I guess there's the last part, right, which is how the layer works.
Yeah, and that can tie into both the mechanics of it, but you do need to consider a little bit, how this layer can function. Is it, as we're getting into types of layers, there's layers that are just formed out of natural landscapes, and those probably don't require upkeep. The creature just lives and is in harmony with their environment. But things like, say, the lich's ancient tomb that is filled with kind of traps and things like that, are those just static? Does the lich have magic that kind of maintains it and keeps it going? Are there minions in the lair that keep the lair kind of, basically, the evil equivalent of spick and span. So there's lots of there's lots of stuff to consider in just the more mundane kind of pragmatic. How can this layer exist and be in the world? But Jeremy, do you want to start us off talking about some of the different types of layers?
I love layers. So there are so many
too.
different layers, and Pete did say evil there. Not necessarily just evil creatures need layers.
Indeed, indeed.
A neutral wizard up in his tower, that tower or her tower or their tower, whatever, that tower is their lair. At the same time, you look at some angels, right, in a monastery atop a mountain. That monastery is their lair. They don't not necessarily have to be evil. But let's start talking about different types. So layers kind of fall under 4 main categories, more or less. There are environmental layers. They're normal landscapes that can be suited to or even sculpted to a degree to fit the creature's whims. Like Pete mentioned earlier, volcano, a great natural layer for a red dragon or really anything.
Or a Jeremy. Or a Gemery the Meanie Pants. It's also a great layer for Gemery.
Entirely possible.
And on the subject of Gemery the Meanie Pants, because this is kind of a fusion of 2 categories here, there's a layer that I would call the diabolical layer. It is the space that is, intentionally designed to be a layer, to be defensible, to be filled with traps, to house things. And these are associated very much with villains. But I would say a diabolical layer is anything that is, covered with traps and intentionally designed to ward off intruders.
Yeah, I think design is the key word, really, for diabolical, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And can I mind if I do the next one too? Because I like this one.
Talk about it.
This is a layer that I don't know if this is something that a lot of people would consider a layer, but I would. And it kind of gets into some of the points we're going to be talking about, which is, extending layers beyond their intended mechanical purpose. But this is a layer I would call the more public layer. I would say, for example, that the king's grand hall, his throne room, that could be considered a lair, because even though it isn't necessarily like, your typical lair, there's not lava jets that shoot up out of the floor. It is a space in which this individual is in complete control and has, mastery over his area and is most comfortable. So while the king in his throne room, or the queen in her throne room, does not necessarily, like I said, have these traps set up, they have, all manner of guards and individuals that are able to kind of control it. They have, peasants standing by the door that they can tell to shut the gates. They have swarms of individuals that would, likely fight and die for them if they were confronted in the space. Additionally, they have, a degree of additional kind of political influence and just weight to their words when they're sitting in their own kingdom at the seat of it. So I think, things along those lines, the more public layer where it's just, almost a social layer of sorts. So, a bit of an extension of the idea of what a layer can be.
Yeah, and of course, our last kind of stereotypical option is the sacred layer, right? And sacred could be desecrated or consecrated. It could be the monastery on top of a castle dedicated to some ancient and holy god, or like Lance's lair on the moon. Or
it's excellent.
It could be something more dark, right? More evil. It could be a corrupted cathedral that once was to Pelor, the god of the sun, but has been shunted into the Shadowfell and is now a bastion of corruption. Right? You can roll with either way, I think, on that spectrum. So I guess the next thing to start talking about, so we've got a couple different types of layers. We're being very brief at the moment because we need to set a framework before we start getting the nitty gritty on how to really make layers rich.
Indeed.
But yeah, now we're going to talk about mundane or non-mechanized layers. So I think most of the time, those natural layers fall into this category. Some sacred layers fall into this category if it's like a holy site, right? Say a temple to Myliki under a cave beneath the world tree, right? That is a layer to a deity. It's a sacred place, but it's a non-mundane place. And yeah, so mundane and non-mechanical layers. It can be any sort of, well, what do we want to talk about, Pete? We want to talk about mundane layers, right? The benefits to them, or?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to note that people associate lairs with a lot of very powerful monsters. Things like liches, things like ancient dragons. Because in the monster manual, which is where the concept of lair that people get that, these high level monsters should have lairs, where that comes from, they look at the high level monsters and they have it, but you can kind of treat any environment, even, for very kind of weak enemies, as a lair. You can, think about people's homes as having, mechanically advantageous situations for them, even if you're not doing something so elaborate as giving them, lair actions that they do every D20. Anything that gives people in their home an advantage could be a lair. For example, the rock in its nests. It's hard to get into a rock's nest. The thief in his thief den knows that it has, a secret trapdoor that he can escape through.
I mean, even a barkeep, right, in his tavern or her tavern, right? You try and intimidate them. Well, they've got the rest of their loyal tavern people who are going to help them. These are all fairly mundane or non-mechanical lairs, where there's really no benefit, right? There's no. I guess like the people are going to help defend the barkeep, but
there's the benefit of there's the benefit of knowledge, and then there's say you're in a wood elven city and there's like a heavy mist that always hangs over the city. Elves are able to hide in that mist that most people aren't, and they're able to see better than most people, so they have a little bit of a natural advantage in that space. And kind of small things like that, I think, can be really neat. And just if a creature has a natural camouflage, letting them be in the environment where they have that advantage.
Yeah. So let's talk about some sort of passive benefits that these lairs tend to provide. So we've talked about actively like hiding, camouflaging, right? But there can be more to it than that. And this is where we're starting to really flush out and make a lair a little richer. So we've decided let's stay on the red dragon train, because I think we're kind of on a good vibe with that. One that people can, relate to.
I agree. Yeah, I mean the red dragon, it's just such a digestible idea, the volcano lair.
So we've got a volcano lair, and obviously that means it's going to be hot. There's the red dragon. And so you can start to ask yourself questions like, well, what does that mean, right? Volcano, sulfur. All right, maybe the air is sulfurous in the volcano lair, and that has some sort of detriment to the party. This is a passive thing. This isn't the dragon takes a lair action and the air is now more sulfury. This is just an added sort of detriment that the party has to deal with as they go along. A cool way to handle this could be maybe they need some sort of like perfumed something to put over their mouth, right? So they're not choking.
To breathe a little bit closer, yeah.
Maybe they need some other way of breathing, right? A way to hold their breath. Perhaps it's just some sort of saving throw, but I'd be cautious of repeatedly forcing saving throws like that, just because it gets tedious. But these are kind of with one way that you can spice up that lair a little bit. Conversely, right, you look at an ancient white dragon. And an ancient white dragon is all about ice, right? Viciousness, brutality. They might have a lair that is completely coated with ice, and maybe it's difficult to move. Or if you're trying to move quickly, right, you might have to make some sort of saving throw to not trip and fall. These kind of things are all ways that you can adjust the environment to make a more dynamic fight, and really your ultimate goal of making the lair more memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also an association with the lair kind of is thought of as, the final chamber in which you confront the boss is generally where the lair actions happen. You can spread those out throughout, an entire dungeon or an entire region beyond. And thank you very much for the subscription, Maddie. But wait, also, I just really want to go back and comment on, I want to know the barkeep's lair actions. Sheba, I do too. I think one of them is probably call tab, like call the tab of the nearest overdue bar patron and inspire them to fight for you or pay a lot of money.
or betray you so they don't have to pay their tab.
Oh god.
That's a very bad lair action. It's got a 50-50 chance to just totally backfire.
I mean, I think it's a powerful lair action. One of them is probably polish glass.
Well, back on topic here.
Sorry, I got distracted when I saw chat going. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, so layers aren't just the final room. Layers should be pervasive throughout the entire dungeon. Like I had mentioned earlier, a good layer will the theme will flow throughout the entire dungeon and will give you an idea for what the players are going to be coming up against well before they get there. So let's talk about. I know we talked about the red dragon for a minute. We're going to come back to that, but a beholder's lair is a really, really great example of a layer that you can really foreshadow a lot of what's going to happen later on. That they're going to run into a beholder if they're venturing into its lair. So they might have big disintegration holes in the wall. There's just perfectly circular holes gone from the wall. Maybe
I've run that
exact dust all over the ground.
Yeah, I've run that exact thing actually.
Yeah, maybe there are stones precariously perched in absolutely ludicrous places that no mortal creature could put them because the beholder has a telekinesis eye ray. Perhaps there are all sorts of small creatures that have been captured and brought in here and charmed using the beholder's charm ray that the players will run into as they go throughout the dungeon. Putting these kind of things throughout and really showing through the environment what they're going to be coming up against, it makes players feel good about that fight with the beholder. Even if they lose, they don't feel like they are cheated out of nowhere. Whereas if you don't know what a beholder is and you walk into that room and you've had no foresight or foreshadowing as to what a beholder is, you're going to die and you're going to feel bad.
When an experienced player goes through a dungeon like that beholder dungeon, a player, or not even an experienced one, but one who's at least familiar with the beholder, and then partway through they come to the realization like, this place was designed for a beholder. We are in, like, when they have that moment where they're in a beholder's lair, all of a sudden, not only is it cool because they figured out things about the world just by interacting with it, well, it makes the world feel believable too, because things are making sense and everything's kind of adding up in their mind. When your players are able to reach logical conclusions about their world just through interacting with it, that means you're doing, one, an incredible job as a DM for leading them to that point, but two, that that's fun. That's really satisfying as a player to have those moments.
No, it absolutely is. I think it's one of the best moments in gaming, right? Is when you figure it out. Humans, what you do, right, is you find stories in everything. That's just what humans do. You look at ink blots and you come up with some sort of meaning to that, some sort of story behind it. And making every layer, right, the dungeon leading up to a layer, a little cookie crumb trail that the players can learn and understand what's there. That's really rich, and it really is fulfilling for players when they get there. Even if they don't know exactly what it is, they might know, let's say, right, a dragon, it's an ancient red dragon, and they see bits of melted stone just along the way, just molten rock that has reformed. And they're like, oh shit, wow, that big boulder was melted partially. They probably get the idea that whatever they're coming up against does fire damage, right? They can make that connection pretty reasonably. And so when they see it's a dragon, they aren't totally baffled, and maybe they have some tactic to use against it. They've planned ahead expecting to see fire damage and maybe prepared some spells. Maybe it's a long dungeon, right? And they prepared some new spells to help them against that.
They got their fire shield.
Feels good. That feels very good. Players, it just very satisfying.
Absolutely. I think there's a great comment here from Face of Jericho. Another cool thing with layers is regional effects, effects to the landscape around their lair due to the presence of the creature. Yeah, that's another thing that they give you in the monster manual to start helping you. And you can tell while they don't I don't think the monster manual overly holds your hand with the regional effects, but it kind of really I think it does an okay job of getting you thinking in these sort of greater terms about what it means for a monster to occupy a space and what a lair really is. But a lot of these are written out in the monster manual for the red dragon, it's things like, the area around, what the central kind of part of the lair is. Things like actually what Jeremy was saying before, there's kind of like sulfur that hangs in the air and it's a little bit tough to breathe. The water is bubbling hot if you try and drink it. It's all stuff like that, and it goes towards setting the ambiance and really building out the space. But I definitely think that those are great resources if you're looking for a place to start, the select monsters that do have those.
Yeah, absolutely. Another great example, going back to the Beholder, is when they do finally come to fight the Beholder, right? They've seen these signs of it using its abilities. That's a key thing. Put signs of your creature using its key abilities. That just makes sense. The creature is going to use its abilities to improve its home. That's just what it does. But in its actual final lair, and I'm actually going to reference back to DnDTime last Friday, where I ran a weird Beholder creature. But when the players confronted it in its lair in the adventure called Snygoruk, you can check it out on Twitch or YouTube, they came across just a incredibly tall cylindrical chamber. It is the quintessential Beholder lair because there's nowhere to hide. It can just fly up and rain hell down upon you. Now, obviously, Snygoruk was not a normal Beholder, so he didn't have all of the advantages a Beholder would normally have in that circumstance. If he had, that probably would have been lethal.
Yeah, I mean,
challenge made.
Like, see, there's some monsters where, as a DM, if you choose to play them to optimal tactics, they're just too powerful. When I think of one, like, if you want to fight, for example, the ancient blue dragon, like, it literally says in the book that their strategy is they just catch you in the open desert, fly high out of your range, and occasionally swoop down and breathe lightning on you from a distance. That's not a fun fight, but it is definitely effective.
Yeah, precisely. It is very effective.
Yeah.
And thinking about that strategy, right? That is a way to run the game. It's just if that you do go into that circumstance, think about for your players how you expect them to get out of it as a GM, and then how they try and get out of it. Just as a heads up, no one likes being told, "Well, you can't do anything," and the dragon kills you.
Yeah.
Okay, that was fun. Lance has drafted up our Barkeep Lair action.
You want to read these? They seem pretty
I'll let you take it, Pete. You take it.
All right. He's got the hand that feeds. The barkeep summons 1d4 berserkers who will defend their favorite alehouse. Call tab. One humanoid with 60 feet of the barkeeper must use a DC 13 Wisdom saving throw or be charmed by the barkeep until the next initiative count. And polish the glass. The barkeeper presents an extremely polished glass which glistens mightily. All humanoids within 30 feet must succeed on a DC 13 con save or be blinded until initiative count 20. Absolutely delightful. Although I will say that some of these feel a little bit to me like these would be legendary actions that this incredible bartender might have.
A very powerful bartender.
That is a powerful bartender. This is, the bartender probably at the best bar in fact, your world.
The best bar.
Yeah, it's the best bar. I love that. That's excellent. But I think that gets to another point I really wanted to talk about with Lairs, and that is use more Lairs. This is a thing that I also feel about legendary actions, and I'm going to tie those in a little bit when I'm talking about this. But I think that those are great mechanics that are really underutilized. The way they're presented in the book, they're only put on very powerful and high-level monsters. Probably, I would think, because of space and timing. But any creature you can toss on so that you want to be more threatening and to feel like a villain, you can toss on some legendary actions and give them some options in their lair to make them feel way cooler. The first one that really comes to mind when I think of a monster that's made to have lair actions but doesn't, and it's the challenge rating 2 monster, the Ettercap.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The Ettercap is, for anyone unfamiliar with it, it's essentially a shepherd of spiders. But what it does is it just sets up like camps and trap nests of webs and has all of the spiders that it follows just feed on people wandering through dark forests and things like that. And I imagine if you're hunting an ettercap in its own territory, would have incredible advantages, and you can make really interesting lair actions to reflect that.
Well, and I love what Maddie just pointed out here. Maddie Morgs in chat saying, enemy AI is sometimes more devastating than straight up abilities that they have. You can get so much more out of layers and strategy than just casting a powerful lightning bolt. Even one of the most powerful spells, bang for buck in game, lightning bolt, that is, they roll a saving throw, and maybe it's not too effective. Ettercap luring the players into a web-infested just trap, that is so much more devastating than the chance at hurting a couple of the characters, right? Because that puts the characters at a incredible disadvantage for the remainder of the fight. And that is I don't know, I think that's cool. I think that's a really engaging way that, like people were saying earlier, it increases the immersion. And really, that's why we focus on layers. That's why we want them. Because a monster with a lair feels like a real monster. It feels like something that actually exists in the world. Because if you could just walk around and willy-nilly kill everything, then there's nothing left. Why is there anything in the world? And at the same time, if the creature is not more threatening in its home, well, then why is it there, right? It has to be weaker outside of its home so it can be killed, otherwise the monsters rule the whole world. And it has to be stronger in its home, otherwise the players rule the whole world. So it's that kind of balance you need.
Yeah, absolutely.
I say players, but the civilization. Dumb, boring stuff.
Yeah, who cares about people and internet? There's a couple of good comments in chat here too. What was that one hunter creature we made on Brews with the lair that can track you wherever you go? The stalker something? That was the gloaming stalker, which we made on Brews, and that's a great example of a creature that we kind of instinctively baked having a lair into that creature's toolkit, where it just has a space in which it always knows where you are. Which I thought was really cool. Not to pat ourselves on the back, but I thought that was a really cool mechanic.
I think that was the Flannel Pug.
Yep,
Polly came up with that one.
Absolutely was the Flannel Pug's idea.
But yeah, that kind of a concept, right? And I think that's really the key about layers, right? You look at what a layer is in the book, and a lot of players jump right to the stat block, and they do that with monsters too. And if you don't read the fluff and the love about the monster, about how it acts, about what it is, it's not special. When you play it, it's not going to be special.
Agreed.
But if you read, and the same thing with a layer, if you just take layer as, these are the 3 layer actions I have, I will use them one, and then the next, and then the next, and it will increase the challenge rating of my encounter. Your encounter is not going to feel any more dramatic. It's not going to feel any more threatening. And it's not going to give that extra level of immersion that reading the full shtick about what a layer is will, right? And putting that into your game. So, yeah, I think the big takeaway, your layer should not just be about increasing the CR. It should be about increasing the fun and the immersion and the believability of your creature.
Absolutely. Another comment from Face of Jericho here. If we're talking about video game design, smart AI design using tactics is always more interesting than just bigger bags of hit points and bigger damage.
Oh, yeah.
Agreed, 100%. I think it actually, while we're talking about it right now, I think an episode on monster tactics would actually be a lot of fun, and we should do DnDTime Talks about tactics sometime.
Well, what's actually really neat is in 4th edition, monsters were designed with tactics in mind, and every single monster had a small description of how you could play it tactically, in addition to just using it. Which is actually really interesting, how they were designed to be used as a tactical unit, if you wanted to play them in such a way. And and I think that's a really cool resource if you say you want to play a bugbear, right? And you really don't know where to start. Crack open one of the 4th edition books. I mean, they're like $5 on the DM's Guild, and look at Bugbear. I think they called the monster. I think they were still the monster manual then. And yeah, just look at their entry for Bugbear and look at the tactics, and it'll give you some ideas on how to use them in a more tactical manner. almost all of those are transferable. They don't radically change monsters through additions usually.
Absolutely. I don't have a ton of experience with 4th edition. I've played the game once, and I've read it quite a bit. Um, it is the quintessential Dungeons and Dragons edition if you like tactics and that's what you're into. And there's, like Jericho was saying there, and I think Maddie Morgan's in agreement, there's so many mechanics that you can pull from that for your games. Yeah. Things like, minions. Oh my god, I love minions so much. Oh dear, it would appear that I've frozen.
You've frozen in a very emotive face, Pete. You're very into whatever you were saying about minions. I love minions too. Minions are a great thing to include in Lairs. Include minions in Lairs. Minions are great.
I just feel so much sometimes, Jeremy, and I can only express it by looking off into the middle distance. Jeremy, I think you're speaking but not using push to talk.
Oh, interesting. Push to talk doesn't work when I'm on Skype. Interesting.
Wait, what? Skype. What is going on? Everything is crumbling around us.
Hello? You guys can hear me.
Hello? I can hear you now.
Guys, everything just had a little run.
So anyway, sorry, we're getting distracted because of a couple of issues. But Jeremy, we wanted to kind of talk a little bit specifically about the ancient red dragon lair and break that down a bit. Would you like to kind of initiate that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Let's jump in. Oh, we got little Pete. It's working.
It's me. It's little Pete. I'm tiny Pete. I'm tiny Pete. That's like a
no, Pete. You're regular Pete now. Yeah, Pete's gonna win the staring contest, Project Y. You're absolutely correct. But yeah, let's take a minute. Let's talk about the ancient red dragon because I think that's a really cool. And I mean, let's be real. It's called Dungeons and Dragons, so let's talk about the dungeon of a dragon.
Whoa!
All right. So we have our ancient red dragon.
Hey! Oh my god, Jeremy, can I just say really quick, the way that it transitioned on the screen, I don't know if you did that naturally, but the way
I did that in purpose, Pete.
That was really good!
Pete, when you stop to point it out, it really kills the sparkle.
No, I want everyone to take a moment and tell Jeremy how good he did, because that was awesome, and I'm very excited about it and didn't know it was going to happen. But anyway, this is the Red Dragons.
You okay, Pete? You just lost your push and talk now.
No, I'm fine. Everything's crumbling around me, but I'm fine.
Face of Jericho, could we do it again? Nah.
It's a one-time. It's a once in a lifetime.
It's a one-time only. So let's talk about the Red Dragon. So this is the entire entry. I mean, there's a bit more to it. Like if you scroll down, we can see all the layer stuff. But this is all the information we have. We have regional effects. We have layer actions. And then we have a description of the Red Dragon's lair. So let's talk a little about it. And, we'll see where we go with this. So, Lance, excellent. It is a D&D time out of D&D time. Well played. Cheaty dice out of cheaty dice. Let's talk about the Red Dragon's lair.
Indeed.
Red dragons lair in high mountains or hills, dwelling in caverns under snow-capped peaks, or deep within the halls of abandoned mines and dwarven strongholds. Caves with volcanic or geothermal activity are the most highly prized red dragon lairs, creating hazards that hinder intruders, and letting searing heat and volcanic gases wash over a dragon as it sleeps. With its hoard well protected deep within the lair, a red dragon spends as much of its time outside in the mountain as in it. For a red dragon, the great heights of the world are the throne from which it can look out to survey all it controls, and the wider world it seeks to control. Throughout the lair complex, servants erect monuments to the dragon's power, telling the grim story of its life, the enemies it has slain, and the nations it has conquered. All right. Sick, right? Just sick. So without even going on to this next topic, layer actions down here, let's just talk about that intro text, because with that alone, you can make a really rich layer for your red dragon.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Let's start with just the description of like the environment, right? Because it broke it up into sections. It broke it up into what kind of environments a red dragon layers in, what it keeps within its lair, and how it spends its time, and its servants. Right? That's cool. So I don't know. What do you think, Pete? Which of those really calls out the most to you? I really
Uh,
like the abandoned dwarven stronghold.
the abandoned dwarven, the abandoned dwarven stronghold is cool. The one that I actually really liked was really enough the snow-capped peaks, because that's just not when I think of a red dragon. I kind of have some very strong preconceived notions about old mines, and I just realized that abandoned dwarven stronghold was a Hobbit reference.
Yeah.
But it took me a minute there. But I the idea of them being kind of comfortable underneath these cold environments, the fire sleeping beneath the ice, there's something very evocative to me about that.
Hmm. So I mean, both of those are really radical. I think the great contrast is cool there. Um, and I mean, what kind of? So let's talk about that one first, right? So right off the bat, if players are in this icy, they're exploring the icy mountains, they find this cave that is the lair of this ancient red dragon, or maybe it's not even ancient. It could just be a young red dragon, right? It's a red dragon. It probably is a young red dragon because the icy peaks are like the kind of crappier ones. It's not volcano; it's just
Indeed.
frozen peak. Uh, so, like, what do they find, right? What do you immediately see when the players are coming in? I mean, right off the bat, I think claw marks digging into walls, right?
Oh
They
yeah.
see scratch marks, the dragon marking its base territory.
Well, do you want to go down and actually take a look at some of the regional effects, because they have some ideas for us?
Well, Pete, I suppose we could.
I mean, I'd love to make our own as well, but let's take a look at what Chris Perkins and the gang were so kind to prepare for us.
So these are the regional effects. This is exactly what we were just talking about. Stuff that how the dragon affects the terrain around it. Usually, well, let me just read it. The region containing a legendary red dragon's lair, is warped by the dragon's magic, which creates one or more of the following effects. Small earthquakes are common within 6 miles of the dragon's lair. Water sources within 1 mile of the lair are supernaturally warm and tainted by sulfur. Rocky fissures within 1 mile of the dragon's lair form portals to the elemental plane of fire, allowing creatures of elemental fire into the world to dwell nearby. If the dragon dies, these effects fade over the course of 1d10 days.
Yes, so those are cool, but
I'm sorry, Lance. Red Dragon Slaying, aka the Hot Springs episode, gone wrong. Oh boy.
Also Roger Twy, if this lair's a quakin', don't come awaken. Pretty good, Roger, pretty good.
Top notch.
So when I think of, if we're going to go with this kind of snowy peaks, we have some ideas here. I imagine, maybe hot springs, because that's something that you expect in kind of a cold environment. These hot springs with like steam coming off of them, and the players go to rest within, and they are too hot to rest in, and they kind of smell a little bit of the sulfur. They're unpleasant. Jeremy was talking about kind of claw marks in different spaces about the cave, some intentional destruction. I'm also imagining regions where the snow is just chunked away. I could picture someone climbing up the snow-capped peak, and there is just a massive space where all of the snow has been completely melted, the ground maybe a touch scorched, and then the bones of some creature that the dragon hunted left on the ground, also torched. But just the huge area around them also worn out by the fire, the heat that their body just emanates.
Well, and I like they give examples for distance, right? 6 miles, small earthquakes. 1 mile, supernaturally warm hot spring. I like the idea that these effects actually extend way further, but as you get closer, right, they become more and more pronounced. So maybe 10 miles away, which is a long distance when you're talking about mountainous travel, right?
Yeah.
That's more than a day's travel over mountains.
Oh yeah.
So we talk about 10 miles, maybe there's just sulfur in the water, and the water is not good. And that right there, immediate impact to your players. They'll notice, they'll find out immediately when they feel sick after drinking the water, And then they'll ask why, and they won't know, right? You get them asking, get them questioning, get them wanting to put the puzzle together. As they get closer, they start to get those hot springs, and then they're like, "Oh, this is great! Let's have a hot springs episode." Sick. And they do. They take a quick short rest. They have their hot springs. They don't worry about it. And then as they start to get closer to within that mile, it's just boiling hot water, right? And the scent of sulfur hangs heavy in what was a snowy peak. And then they're like, "All right, something's wrong, guys. This isn't fun anymore." And using that gradual transition as a way to kind of pique interest, I think is a really cool tool.
And as kind of an introduction thing, and to combine with some stuff that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, actually, when we were talking about overland travel, what Jeremy was talking about, them kind of going to get water, that's a kind of thing that wouldn't come up. But that, as a DM, it's okay to just tell them, like, you go to get water, and you can't because this odd thing happens. And now you have, well, for one thing, from the overland travel episode, now you have a cool mission where they also have to figure out how they're going to drink on this journey. But it's okay to just, apropos of nothing, bring this stuff up to start getting them started on the track. They don't have to necessarily ask about it in order for you to start introducing this stuff.
I mean, even if they're just like, all right, we'll just eat good berries, and you say that's fine, right? But at least they have that niche, that thought of something isn't as it should be. And you get them thinking. I really also dig the little elemental creatures leaking through.
Yeah, cool. Very, very cool.
It's just a neat, because no one expects to fight a fire elemental on top of a goddamn mountain. Nobody.
No, sir. I do now.
Well, now you do. But still. Or, the ancient abandoned dwarven stronghold. No one expects the furnaces to still be lit. But the key is they aren't lit as just fire elementals, right? Like, something that like, oh, geez! And the players might mistake that, right? They're like, oh, this must have been left over from the dwarves. But it wasn't, right? I like those kind of double think. Well, maybe it's this, or maybe it's not.
Just a side note, I just had a cool idea for a dwarf, a high-level dwarven character who's a blacksmith that liked his forge by conjuring fire elementals that live inside of his forge. That sounds rad as hell. Side note.
That's a pretty dope character concept, yeah.
I apologize to distract. So do you want to start looking at some of the actual lair actions?
I mean, we could, I guess.
The quote-unquote lair actions?
I mean, yeah, sure. So we'll look at the lair actions now. The thing that we've talked about this whole time but have avoided talking about so far.
We got 10 minutes left. I think it's time.
Lair actions work in a very particular way in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. And that way is as follows. On initiative count 20, losing initiative ties, the dragon takes a lair action to cause one of the following effects. The dragon can't use the same effect 2 turns in a row. Magma erupts from a point on the ground the dragon can see within 120 feet of it, creating a 20-foot high, 5-foot radius geyser. Each creature in the geyser area must succeed on a DC 15 dexterity saving throw, taking a bunch of fire damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. Another lair action. A tremor shakes the area in a 60-foot radius around the dragon. Each creature other than the dragon on the ground in that area must succeed on a DC 15 dexterity saving throw or be knocked prone. Volcanic gases form a cloud in the 20-foot radius sphere, centered on a point the dragon can see within 120 feet of it. The sphere spreads around corners, and its area is lightly obscured. It lasts until initiative count 20 on the next round. Each creature that starts its turn within the cloud must succeed on a saving throw or become poisoned until the end of its turn. While poisoned this way, a creature is incapacitated.
Oh, jeez.
Heinous.
That's pretty good. So what do you think of these, Jeremy? Personally, like, I think that the effects are powerful, and they're definitely going to do a lot to increase the challenge rating of a fight. But a lot of these feel a little bit rote to me.
Here's the problem. And we talked about this earlier. In fact, we talked specifically about that third layer action. We brought it up explicitly with the gaseous, the noxious fumes in the air. And we talked about how we would not do exactly what the book says to do, which is suddenly gas is there. And you can make that work, right? A crack opens in the wall and gas spews out onto you. However, I feel like having the lair simply just be filled with this noxious gas that you maybe have to hold something to your mouth to diffuse or something like that is much more interesting. It's much more engaging. It provides a puzzle for your players to solve.
Exactly. There it is.
And more so, it provides a huge extra dimension to the combat once it starts. You have to have a hand free to hold this thing to your mouth. Right?
Or otherwise, you have to be clever enough to like set up a little gas mask for yourself.
And then what?
Arises.
You get hit by the dragon's fire breath, and what happens to that gas mask?
Exactly. I was going to say the situation arises where you no longer have access to the tool that you're relying on to breathe, and then one of your allies has to come over and set you back up as you're coughing and sputtering on the. That's just so much more interesting of a lair action to me, and it doesn't feel. And the thing about the gas kind of spurting upwards, it just has a tendency to feel very gamey. It doesn't feel like that's what the lair function would be. It feels like this is a mechanic to make this fight a little bit more than it normally is by having these gases erupt kind of conveniently where we are and at different times.
And, it's interesting because I think Jericho hit the nail on the head earlier. With his comment in the chat about, I'm trying to find it right.
Hashtag Pete has disappointed Jeremy by not being into lore.
Okay, anyway. No. I mean, if we're talking about video game design, smart AI design using tactics is always more interesting than just bigger bags of hit points and bigger damage. All these effects is your dragon gets a little bit extra damage or can cheat a little bit. Introducing that nuanced tactical gameplay with you now have to do something to circumvent and counteract this extra aspect, this extra dimension to the combat is going to be more engaging to your players, and it's going to feel more rewarding when they win. Whereas getting killed by a magma geyser erupting is going to feel like bullshit.
It's going to be like,
it's going to be like, okay, sure. Great. The dragon knocked me unconscious at the beginning of the last turn. It hit me with its last attack for 2 failed death saving throws. And at the start of the initiative, magma erupts on me and I'm dead. And no one got a chance to even use a healing thing on me. Great. That was fun.
I got Shrek'd. Another thing, like if we can look at this tremor ability, it knocks all the players that are in the space prone. I would much rather than just have at the start of one round, there's a sudden kind of shaking of the earth. I would rather have those last multiple rounds and slowly build up, where the players have an opportunity to know there's going to be a time where the earth's going to shake and they're going to probably fall if they're standing up. Therefore, they have an opportunity to maybe put themselves in a position where they're not going to fall. If they have like the ability to fly, they'll make sure they're not standing on the ground when that happens. And they can factor it into their thoughts and plans as they're kind of moving forward.
Or if you really want to make stuff, if you want to add a lot of drama to it, take a note out of 4th edition. When the dragon becomes bloodied, aka reduced to fewer than half of its hit points, the ground shakes dramatically and cracks open, and now there's a huge fissure in the ground, splitting the arena in half. Right? Now, players on one side of the cool. Lair are now 50 feet away from the other side, separated by this massive crack. Right? This is now a new dramatic element to the game, where you're not going to just say like, all right, roll a dex save or die in this endless pit. But instead, there's a new element to the game. There's a new element to this fight that's going to make it memorable. No one's going to feel memorable because, I mean, if you're on 1 hit point and you roll that successful dex, I guess 1 hit point, you take half damage and die. If you're at a couple hit points and you succeed on your dex save and because of half damage, you barely don't die, you might remember that. But players will absolutely remember that red dragon who, when things seemed dire, suddenly the earth itself split in twain and rattled as if the ground itself was fighting to defend the dragon, right? They'll remember this dramatic battle. They'll remember the gas building up and the dramatic moment where the player falls unconscious and their mask has burned up.
And that kind of thing can very much, that allows you to do something that is also a great idea to do with bosses, which is to give them not even my final form. That's a not even my final form. That doesn't even feel like a not even my final form. You get to use that as a DM, more than once in a campaign. And when, the landscape of the battlefield suddenly changes in a dramatic encounter, that's going to be awesome for the players. you still get to have other kind of things that are similar to that in other aspects. But using the lair for that is a great idea. I think that's an awesome strat, Jeremy.
Yeah, and before we were kind of coming to a conclusion here, but let's just take a quick moment to just specify: we are not saying that lair actions are bad. These are an amazing start if you're new to the game, or even if you're just new to DMing, or even if you're an experienced dungeon master and you're just running, you didn't immediately expect this, right? You haven't been, it's kind of a one-shot, one-off thing.
Yeah.
But for enemies that really matter, for villains in your game, for big dramatic fights, I think taking this extra step, going that extra 9 yards, right? That's going to mean a lot for your players. It's going to feel good, and it's going to be super fulfilling, at least in my experience.
Absolutely agreed. And with that, I think that's a pretty good place to end this discussion. Jeremy, do you have anything else you'd like to say on the topic?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, go ahead.
Continuing with our theme of layers, throughout the rest of the week, I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff focusing on layers. Our game on Friday is going to, our DnDTime game on Friday is going to focus on a specific layer, and we'll kind of make a dramatic conclusion with it. And then on Sunday for Delves, there's going to be it's going to be all about a layer, or maybe a bunch of layers. We'll have to see what happens.
Such wonderful corporate synergy.
Cool. But yeah, our incredible corporate synergy. Hasbro would be proud. Hasbro, please pay us. Please.
Oh God, we need that Hasbro money. Send that our way, please. And in that case, Jeremy has already said the things that we normally say about what we have for shows. So thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode of DnDTime Talks. We appreciate you hanging out. We love you all very much.
But I love you more than Pete.
And I love you more than that.
Damn it. But I love you more than Pete.
I can live with that.
See, I can just mute Pete with my push to talk priority speaker so that I am the most loved. Anyway, what I meant to say here is let's take a minute to open up or to end with our last segment, our new segment of DnDTime Talks called Ask Pete and Jeremy. We're going to try and do this almost every week. I mean, as long as we got some good stuff going on.
I didn't forget about it.
For the questions, we're going to answer them. You can ask these questions in the Ask Pete and Jeremy channel on our Discord server. You can find links below. So let's go through and see what interesting conversation pieces we have today, Pete.
Very well. I believe did we answer last week? I think
we're on V Bunny's question.
Yes.
How many elves work at the Keebler Elves factory? Fuck if I know, dude.
Oh, I can tell you, it is actually 213 elves.
Oh, wow. You just knew that one?
Yeah, I know. I'm certain. I'm certain.
Damn.
You can't see my fingers. Guys. You can't see my fingers crossed on the. Well,
serious question though. Also by V Bunny. He prefaced it with serious question though. Can you guys start naming the brews you sip on stream at the beginning of the stream for brews? I think we do. It's just our brews suck.
No, hey, Jeremy, speak for yourself.
Suck.
Jeremy just drinks one brew, is the thing. But I always actually do talk at least a tiny bit about what beer I'm drinking. I wouldn't call myself a beer snob by any means, but I drink enough to know a bit. So that being said, maybe we can emphasize that aspect of the show more someday, but maybe not always, because mostly we just like to homebrew stuff.
Yeah. Next question by Switch, otherwise known as Adrian P. in the chat. Was the Halloween event a planned way for you two to soft reset Bartholomew? Oh, I love this question. Questions like these, Switch, primo question. Guys, ask questions like this. No, not at all.
And a corollary to this question, can we expect some story to come from this soft reset of Bartholomew? It was not a soft reset of Bartholomew, so we cannot. The answer is no.
Story though.
And then when will we get a soft reset on Roger? And also, just as a side note, maybe you get a little bit more. I'm not entirely even sure what you mean by a soft reset, but it definitely was not we didn't actually plan for Bartholomew to die. We knew there was a chance, but we did not intentionally plan that.
I'd say that I think the question, right, what he's getting around to, and I think we can say this, is there some greater consequence? Maybe that's not his question, but I think we can say that, yeah.
Yeah, I think the question is there some story? And the answer is yes, there's a story.
Absolutely. Next question. Switch asks again, have there been any missions you wanted to run but couldn't due to any restrictions, i.e. player level, lore of DnDTime, etc.? Oh my god. Yeah.
I will answer a different answer, and that answer is, for me, not that many. If I can't think of one off the top of my head, really, whatever I want to do, I just kind of do it. I mean, there's certainly some higher level monsters that we don't have access to because they would just TPK automatically, but usually I'll just make a weaker version of that monster if I really want to run it.
See, my adventures that I want to run, right, what ends up happening is I get like really into something, like the zoo, right, the Central City Zoo, and I have a handful of like other zoo adventures that I have planned out. But what'll happen is I'll start going and I'll hit a funk, or something will change, and I'll be like, oh shit. For example, when Safari Jack died, I was like, oh damn, I have to find a way to resolve this before I go back and do more zoo stuff, because to me that felt like an important enough thing that happened to the zoo for me to not just go on like it didn't happen, or to just blow it off. There are also some adventures that like the whole bunch of dumb dwarf adventures that I just
I don't know if that's a restriction of time, which is a whole nother thing. There's definitely lots of ones that I table because I'm like, I don't know if this is worth, because there's so many things I want to do. I don't know if I have time for this one.
Yeah.
But I think that's another very good question. You're throwing some heaters here. And then the last Switch question, last but not least, who's your favorite Galanodal you've run an adventure for?
Ready.
Oh, nice.
Oh, no, John. Wait, I haven't run for John.
I think I'm the only one that's seen John. But
I like John the most.
I'm going to take the... I really liked John, too. I was thinking John, but I'm going to take the obvious choice and pick Switch, because I know Switch. And every time I see Switch in the game, I have so much invested in the character now from all the time that Switch has been in game. And when I say this, for anyone unfamiliar with the land of DnDTime, Switch is the name of the person and also the character. So yeah. I'm referring to not just all of Switch's characters, but specifically Silius Galanodal, aka the Judge Switch.
I also really liked... Shit, it's hard. I like a lot of your character, Switch. Because I also really like Sarah and how much Sarah hates me. Anyway, I feel like there's like a personal investment here.
Sarah does actively hate.
Bionic Shiba asks, what is your favorite time players went completely off script and you just had to roll with it? Oh boy. Pete, you got one off the top of your head?
Yeah, I can start on this one. I think one of my favorite ones of this was we had some technical difficulties, and I had to make up an adventure for people in game 2. And that, Bionic Shiba, you were actually in that game. And before the stream, I asked everyone, I was like, hey, what do you want to do? And they're like, let's go into Bartholomew's bag. And so that one there's no script. And so it was entirely based on what their actions were. And it was just raw improv, which is a way I ran my games for a while. And it was a lot of fun, and I had an absolute blast doing that. I don't usually do that for DnDTime, but it was good to do that again.
Oh my god, Farfel reminded me of the time they went fishing in the adventure The Quacken. Oh my god, I think it was The Quacken. No, it was Bloodbath was the name of the adventure when they fought The Quacken. Where like I had like a thing with like sirens and shit that were gonna like try and charm them, and then they just decided to go fishing instead. And that was just I don't know, it was just great. I think everyone had a great time. I really enjoyed it.
Actually, can I also mention another game from that same night where it was the Island of Misfit Monsters, where I'd very much intended them for them to have a lot of battles with goofy monsters, and instead they ended up creating a civilization and reworking the farm structure of this place. And like the final moment of the adventure was not an encounter, but them all like wiping their brows as they looked out over the sunset of a new world for these poor misfit monsters. A very odd adventure, but definitely unique, I would say, in the land of D&D time.
Yeah, excellent question. The forgotten one for both Pete and Jeremy. Do you have a favorite quote said by any player you've had in D&D time? No, I don't have a favorite quote. There are so many amazing quotes. I don't think I can just pick one. I just can't do it.
To throw one out that always sticks open in my mind, it was from the very, very early days of D&D time.
Oh, wait, shit, I got one too.
And someone at one point just screamed very like they approached a door and it was an intense situation. They just said, "I opened the door with reckless abandon," and I really loved that. For some reason, that's always stuck in my head.
Mine was actually, and I think back now, the first episode of D&D time, and it was from Farfel 13 and Chad. He's playing Kukov, his half-elf ranger, and he the quote that stuck with me is, as the enemies were like fleeing, "I shoot them in the back like a hero."
I remember this. I remember this.
So good. Just like just like excellent. That to me embodies Bartholomew's Adventurers. Next question.
Reflected.
Go ahead, Pete.
For the both, do you have a favorite item? If you don't want spoilers, favorite item that's been drawn is okay. Favorite item in the bag.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think I can pick one right off the top of my head. This was an item that Jeremy made that I fell in love with, but no one seems to like it, but I as a DM love it. And that item is the temporary friend/fiend. It is a consumable. It is just a small gnome that you can basically activate this gnome and he'll run around with you and help you on your adventure. And then at the he has a 50-50% chance of ending up being evil. And if he's evil, he will...
It's only like a 10% chance, actually.
Did we change it? Yeah, I think originally it was 50-50, and then we nerfed the odds. And there's a 10% chance or so of them being evil and then betraying you at a dramatic moment. And as a DM, that item is an absolute blast because one, you know the player the whole time is looking at their so-called friend that's being really nice to them and thinking like, but what if he's evil? And two, that moment of betrayal when they finally fall in love with them and then right at the moment you're just, nope, it was the 1 in 10 if it ends up happening. Or I also envisioning the scenario where they like end up killing the temporary friend and it's not evil because they just decide to stop trusting it. All of these things I adore. And so that's probably my favorite item. It's very good it's a very DM oriented item, I suppose.
You know, there's so many items I love in the bag. I don't think I can just pick one. And I know that's a super cop out. The jar of bees is pretty rad. I love the idea of the jar. I just throw a fucking jar of bees at them.
Yeah, it's very simple.
Just great. But I think my favorite item just all around from even outside of D&D time would be Viari's Apocalypse Dagger in Acquisitions Incorporated. Viari played by Patrick Rothfuss, where on a natural 20, the world just is destroyed. It's great.
What?
It's very bad.
I haven't watched all of that Inc.
It's happened one time, but it was great. Just a fun concept. Anyway, what's the next question? Face of Jericho asks, what is your favorite character made by the Face of Jericho played on D&D time so far? I don't know, man. I don't know if I can give you like a favorite character.
A favorite? I think we need to see a larger Face of Jericho character pool because I want to see the full scope of what Face of Jericho has to offer before we because for example the Galanodal clan does have 12 members. I do want to see some more of your characters though, Jericho.
So Pete and I both gave you cop-out answers.
We've given you a cop-out, but
actually no, I know. Dave the Rapper. Was it Dave the Rapper? That monster that you submitted is amazing.
Or John the Rapper.
John, yeah, sorry. Alrighty. Well, okay. Don't put us on the spot with favorite characters, guys.
This is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, favorite D Forgotten One character so far? Like them all.
I mean, it's Anadulcia. It's the one we've seen the most. Let's be real.
Yeah, that's fair. Can we finally get an episode about homebrew on DnDTime Talks? That's interesting because we have a whole show for it. I mean, I guess we could talk about. You know what I think would be an interesting topic more than talking about how to homebrew, or I guess a little bit about what you should consider when you homebrew, like what to and what not to homebrew in your games and kind of how to be careful with that. I think that might be a good topic. Although I don't know if just a topic about our homebrewing strategies we would do, because we just have a whole show where we just do that.
Well, it's weird, right? Because the episode we'd have for talks about how to homebrew is how to add homebrew to your game. And I can do it right now, the whole episode. 1. You ready, guys? 1. 3 steps. 1. Don't immediately nerf something just because you see it work really well once. I've seen people try and nerf sneak attack for rogues because it does a lot of damage on one time when the rogue crits. Don't do that shit. Just let it play out over a long period of time. If you see that there is consistent problems, then you can talk about changing things. 2, always talk to your players before you homebrew stuff and before you change the rules. If you change the rules on them and they don't know the rules have changed, that's bad.
You're a dummy.
3, only do homebrew and change the rules if it's going to make things fun. If you're going to change or nerf or make something weak, if a character wants to play a homebrew class or race or whatever, and the option is going to be so bad that that character is going to feel bad, or it's going to be so good that everyone else at the table is going to feel bad, it's not worth putting in. So only do homebrew that's going to be fun for everyone at the table. Doesn't have to be balanced. It just has to be fun for everyone involved. And everyone's got to be on the same page. So that is everything you need to know about homebrew. You can do whatever the fuck you want. Like, you can give all your level 1 characters +5 Holy Avenger long swords, or give a Holy Avenger dagger. Who gives a shit, right? Like, go for it.
Crowley, why is the Great Big Cloud your favorite god?
Fear.
The answer is Bloom will fuck the Great Big Cloud up 3 days out of 10. And then the other 7 days too. Coming at you, you chunkus! Fight me! I am God here. I have control.
I, for one, love our Cloud Overlord.
Too late. I can't take it back now. Favorite all-time DnDTime character, and whatever Face of Jericho is typing, we'll also do that one. But then they're the last. Favorite all-time DnDTime character, that one that Jeremy played that one time.
Vilnaeus?
Yeah, Vilnaeus Doom Pact. I just said it because it's completely apropos.
No, let's say NPC. Let's say NPCs. We're not going to talk about player characters, guys. We're not going there. What's your favorite NPC? Favorite NPC in DnDTime?
I mean,
I'll go first. Mine's kind of tainted by outside experience. Actually, it's not. I was going to say Winsler, but I think it's Bloom.
I love my boy. I love my sweet boy B, Bartholomew, and I would be sad if I ever couldn't be him. But I really love. This is a character that you guys haven't seen a lot of yet, and Jeremy hasn't shown you a lot of Valerian, but I absolutely adore Valerian.
Oh boy.
And I also, I am the Trash King. I, Pete, am the Trash King, so I also like screaming that I am that.
And as our last final question, who's your favorite god? And this is a great tie-up for DnDTime Worlds. Who's your favorite Empyrean god for both? I was not in with a lot of Worlds. I wasn't there for the whole shtick like Pete was. But my favorite god is the god that I suggested at the beginning. It's Cherish.
Is it Cherish?
Yeah.
God. I like Karoshia, as you can tell by the fact that I featured the entire last episode around Karoshia. I think that what she does is an absolute delight. She's just an asshole, which is a very fun god archetype.
But with this, I think we come to a close. If you have more questions for us, feel free to put them in here. We'll hit them up next week. And with that, I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Pete. And this is DnDTime Talks.
DnDTime Talks. Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.